Shawn Belle probably wouldn't remember. Well, he might. He played 4 games with the Regina Pats. Oh, he would remember that. I was the radio guy for the Pats at the time. Pats dealt him to the Tri-City Americans, where he would spend 5 seasons. First round pick of the St. Louis Blues, 30th overall in 2003. Went on to play in the National Hockey League with the Minnesota Wild, Montreal Canadiens, Edmonton Oilers, Colorado Avalanche, tours of duties around the minors. And he joins us today. I'm very much looking forward to this chat. Shawn, how are you doing today, by the way?
I'm doing good. I do remember you. I remember back in White City when things were when I had my first camp.
Oh, good. Well, I interviewed you a couple times. So I thank you for that, Shawn. It was quite a story, though, by the way. I mean, that was you were the big prospect in that when the Pats were loading up and dealt you to the Tri-City Americans. And we'll get to the pro hockey stories in a moment. But what do you remember about that time as a young kid from Edmonton that probably wasn't aware of how big of a deal you were in the middle of in those trades at the deadline?
Honestly, when I first got drafted, I didn't even really know much about the Bantam draft at all. When my name got called, I think it was, I can't remember, the general manager, Mr. Parker. He called me and he's like, "Hey, welcome to the Regina Pats," and they were super excited to have me. I was kind of just stunned and taken back by it because I didn't really know much about it, like I said. But that first camp in White City, like mentioned, was very interesting. It was eye-opening, nerve-wracking at the same time. But I felt that a lot of the veteran players, took to me right away. And I remember specifically that, Paul Brown, one of my first face-offs, one kid came up to me, kind of pushed me. I pushed him back. Brownie moved me aside and said, "Hey, I got this, kid." And, they ended up fighting, and it was a pretty cool moment. And, the guys adhered themselves to me, or at least I adhered myself to them, and they had my back.
Brownie, if there ever was a Ricky Bobby clone, that would be Paul Brown. But I got to say something, Shawn, that you were kind of ahead of your time. And I think the viewers would get a lot out of this, the hockey fans. Like, was your dad your agent, or did you have an agent at the time? What do you remember about that era of your life?
I did have an agent. His name was Mark Hall. After my first year pro, we ended up splitting ways. But, I did have a guy right out of the gates. My dad was pretty big into my hockey career. He did a lot of my training early on. And then I kind of ended up going with a guy by the name of Simon Bennett, who actually is the strength and conditioning coach for the Oilers now.
Well, the reason I bring that up, and Darren, you'll find this interesting, and I think I told this story the other day. I was standing in Brent Parker's office, and it was fax back then, and your agent sent the Pats kind of a list of not demands, but things that you would need before you would set foot on the ice in the Western League, and Brent signed it, sent it back, and then traded you to Tri-City.
I wonder what kind of demands were on there then.
You know what? But the point was, it wasn't anything crazy. It was for off-ice conditioning things and nutritional things. It was all hockey related.
Schooling.
Yeah, schooling stuff, all of that. But Brent's like, "I'll sign this, and we're shipping you to Tri-City for the deal." Yeah, exactly. Which I thought was kind of cool. So your pro hockey career, tell me about that. You had a lot of stops. What were the most memorable ones?
There was a lot of stops. I think, thinking back about my hockey career now, you look like the first trade was even before I even stepped foot professionally. I was gone from St. Louis to Dallas, and I think that kind of put me behind the 8 ball. And honestly, I now that I'm coaching, I look back on it and I think about how many times you have a different coach in your career really has an effect on you. I went from Rob Dahm, for one of my first year pros, to Kevin Constantine, who decided he wanted to completely change my game. And as you probably know, I was pretty offensive defenseman. My biggest attribute was my speed and my skating. And I tried to use that. And then with Rob Dahm, he tried to nurture that as much as possible. And then when I got to Constantine, he kind of said, this is a quote, is, "Do you think you're Nick Lidstrom?" And I said, "No, but I'm going to try to make plays." And he said, "No, it's off the glass and out every single time." So, thinking back on the hockey career, obviously it's not where I wanted it to go, but, I had a lot of interesting stops and some good coaches and some good mentors along the way.
The skating I remember, but the puck handling too. I mean, this guy is smooth. Not enough O's in smooth to describe Shawn Belle's game. And it's unfortunate that they were trying to turn you into a defensive defenseman. But, you bring up the coaching, Shawn, and you remember back with the Mike Babcock stuff and all that era, the Me Too movement of coaching, as I called it in the fall, which seems like a decade ago, by the way.
Yeah.
But it just seems so unfair to the good coaches. You know what I mean? What
it was
did you
such a different time, though. I can completely understand, some of the scenarios that, maybe some of it shouldn't have happened, but, it was a different time. Like, if you got kicked, it was, you need to go fight someone. Think about now how many times a coach would tap you on the shoulder and say, "Kate, you're going to go grab that guy and you're going to go fight him." If you tried to do that now, it's kind of like frowned upon. It was a completely different time. So yes, would, you like, for example, Bill Peters to have not said what he said, 100%. But there was a lot of things that you could get away with then as opposed to what you can now.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and so speaking of that, you said you're coaching now. What's give me your life update. It's only been 20 years since the last time we talked.
Yeah. So I'm coaching at OHA, so Okanagan Hockey Academy. They have a branch in Edmonton. I'm coaching the under 16 team. So it's just a strictly 15-year-old league. I just started that. This is my first year. Prior to that, I was at NAIT for 3 years. And then prior to that, I was with the Sherwood Park Crusaders for one as an assistant coach. That was my first year coaching after playing. And then I also opened up my own strength and conditioning program. It's called Lead Sports. I've been running that for about 4 years now, and we've got about 40, 50 kids. So things have been good, and I've been extremely busy.
Obviously you're immersed in the hockey world. What is the buzz up there about coming back this season? What do you we don't know, so I know I'm not going to pin you down for an answer, but what do you think might happen? What are you hearing?
Well, I'm hoping personally in June. Selfish reasons, obviously, with my gym opening up, but I'm hoping June. I'm kind of hearing a little bit of that. We just kind of got off a phone call with our OHA group, and they were starting to work on a return to play program, or at least get back to practices and whatnot. So that's kind of my feeling right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it pushed into July.
Shawn, by the way, one of our viewers, I was going to let you go, but one of our viewers wrote in, and Clark and I were talking about this the other day. Gord says, "What was your experience, Shawn, with the 2005 World Junior team, one of the best ever assembled?" If I may, the best ever assembled. Sidney Crosby, Phaneuf, Getzlaff, playing in Grand Forks, and you were on that club. What was that like?
Oh, that was an unbelievable experience. Every guy that we had basically just set out right from the first drop of the puck at camp that we were not losing, and the guys came together very quickly. One thing that, I don't know if a lot of people know is that entire group had basically grown together through all the under 16s, 17s, 18s, and then obviously with the culmination of the under 20 championships. But, we had been to so much, or at least played against each other so much, that we had a pretty strong bond. And then obviously when you add in Crosby, who was a phenom, just put us over the top. And what an unbelievable experience. I still think about it to this day. And, it's been on air for the last couple of days. So it's nice to kind of relive that. But that was a special team and a special group.
No kidding. Well, you too, man. We haven't forgot about you. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for the time. And don't be a stranger, and stay safe up there.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Shawn Belle joining us, former Regina Pat, Tri-City American, NHLer. There's a fella with some stories.
Oh, yeah. And we only scratched the surface.
Just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.